Robert, would you like to introduce this video?
No, thank you.
Okay. Welcome everybody, thank you for tuning in for another review from the 2022 Emtb Shootout. Today, we are going to be reviewing the Canyon Spectral on CFR LTD edition. This was kind of a bit of a surprise. We were hoping just to be getting a regular CFR, but due to current availabilities, the only one we could get was the LTD, which is a little bit different spec than what we can get in North America. Robert and your compatriots over there can get it. So, and obviously Flight Attendant is really cool, and that is one of the biggest differentiators, obviously spec as a whole, but the Flight Attendant is the big thing to talk about here, and we will do so. So as I said, the model we were hoping to get was going to be retailing for about $10,500. This model here is significantly more expensive at $13,000. However, nothing is spared on this bike. It has the most batteries of any bike on the Shootout, correct?
Yep, 8 whole batteries.
Yep, between Flight Attendant, dropper post, controls, you name it, it is a high-tech bike. Shimano EP8 drive unit, putting out 85 Newton meters of torque. It has a Canyon partnered 900 watt-hour battery. Suspension, again, as I said, RockShox Flight Attendant equipped Lyric Ultimate with a RockShox Super Deluxe Ultimate rear shock. SRAM AXS drivetrain, AXS on the dropper post as well as the derailleur. SRAM Code RSC brakes and DT Swiss HXC 1501 wheel set. She's ready to rip, right?
Ready to rip. Mullet wheels, 150mm front travel, 155mm out back.
Which I thought was interesting.
More travel out back, the only one in the test.
Yeah, and I don't know many other bikes in period that have more travel out back than out front.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like a prime bike for a 164.
Well, yeah, overforking it's going to be fun.
We tested the size large. The geometry on that provided a 485mm reach, a 652 stack height, 440mm chainstays, 1,252mm wheelbase with a 27mm bottom bracket drop, which we felt was a bit low.
A little bit.
65.5 degree head tube angle and a 76.5 degree seat tube angle. Let's start with the ride characteristics, Robert. Get into the trail, to the top, climbing. What do you think?
Well, before you get to the trail,
yes,
there is the one thing we need to talk about, the Flight Attendant. So it adds a couple of extra little steps to the bike, getting it set up perfectly. You kind of set up your sag as normal, and then you've got to go through the little calibration process and get everything dialed in using the SRAM AXS app. And to start with, it's a little bit daunting. If you kind of read the 41, 42 page manual, you'd go into the process expecting it to take a long time and be a lot of effort. As it turns out, it's not actually that bad. If you follow the SRAM AXS app, it's like 2 steps. It took me about 30 seconds. Okay, so we have the bike sag set up front and rear to my weight. And then we hold down these buttons for a few seconds until it flashes white. And then we just got to hold it vertically until it flashes. There we go. And then now I need to lean the bike over until it flashes. There we go. And that's it calibrated. Not too difficult. So it is setting up the Flight Attendant to your weight so it knows your natural bias on the bike, front and rear. And basically what the Flight Attendant does is it tracks your bike's position forwards and backwards to calculate what the trail is doing. So it locks out, puts it into a pedal mode when it senses the trail's going up the way, and then hopefully turns off into an open mode for the descents, so you've got more use of your suspension travel.
I noticed I couldn't get the lights to flash the correct way when I tried to log in and connect. I connected quickly, but I just couldn't get the calibration to flash the correct lights, which frustrated me. I'm also like to look at maps when I go on road trips. So.
I think it may be an age thing. This is a high-tech bike. For those from a previous era, it's maybe not the going to be the easiest thing to set up, but for a tech whiz kid like myself, it did just take like 30 seconds. So I don't think it's too much of a problem.
As far as performance of it goes, I wasn't too old to enjoy that.
Yeah.
It was quite impressive. It definitely makes an audible sound. You can hear. At first, I thought like maybe this is too annoying for me. Maybe I don't like this. You know, I'd come out of a nice smooth berm and try to get 1 or 2 pedal strokes in to pump a roller into a jump. And like as soon as I would come out of that corner and pedal, I could hear zzz, zzz, you know. And then as soon as you drop, you know, weightless or you enter a rock garden, it would you don't hear it once the bike starts bouncing. But what do you think about pedally XC trails where it's constantly going on and off?
To start with, I was the same. It was just a little bit too annoying. I think some of that was to do with the calibration. It seems to be quite sensitive to the calibration. I tested it a couple of times, playing about with the orientation of the bike ever so slightly. It asks you to be on a perfectly flat level surface, and to start with, it maybe wasn't quite totally level, and the calibration being thrown out meant that the bike didn't quite react to the terrain in the way that you would want. But then we got it onto a dead level surface. I checked it on my phone just to make 100% sure. And when that happens, it starts making sense. You know, you're on a flat bit of terrain. It goes into the pedal mode. It's not too wallowy because the suspension, when it's open, is pretty soft and sensitive.
Yep.
So if you are finding yourself in the open mode and you're pedaling, it's not a super efficient bike. But that's when the Flight Attendant comes into its own, because when it is calibrated properly and it goes into the pedal or the lockout mode as you're cranking it, it firms the bike up and suddenly you're taking off like a bit of a rocket ship. And it's a lot of fun. I think the tech has a lot of merits to it. It might not be for everyone, but it makes a big difference to how it handles. Like as soon as it kind of gets it wrong from time to time, you know about it.
So is this an upgrade you would personally spend your money on for a bike?
It would depend on my terrain.
Okay.
For my typical, if you're only going up a fairly steep climb and then coming down something, I don't think it's got much merit at all. But if your trails are undulating, it works. It makes the bike feel a lot sportier. But it doesn't take away anything from the descending as a bike with a lot of anti-squat and a lot of pedaling platform might, if it doesn't have the technology to play with.
What stood out to you when you were on the trail?
So it's got a 900 watt hour battery, the biggest on test, but for the most part, it hides it real well. It's pretty poppy and playful and agile. You can change direction on the trail pretty well. I think it was a really close second overall in the trail category for the most playful. And yeah, it's super fun on the way down. And compared to the Heckler, it just has a little bit more sensitivity off the top and is just a more comfortable machine overall. It's just that when you kind of hit it as hard as you can. Maybe you've taken it into the bike park, which isn't necessarily what it is designed for, but it's going to happen from time to time. It doesn't have quite the same level of kind of confidence-inspiring stability and big hit kind of compliance as the other bikes in the trail category, I wouldn't say.
So speaking to that stability, this bike has a 65.5 degree head tube angle. Specialized Levo 64.5, Santa Cruz Heckler 64.5. Obviously many other bikes in the Shootout, but those are two we kind of compared this bike to a lot, both in terms of playfulness and in terms of like stability getting into that rougher bike park, because those are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. Levo is stable and feels great. Heckler, very playful and fun. I know it was one of your favorites for the most playful bike.
Yeah.
Do you think going to a 164 and slackening that head tube angle out would be what you would do on this?
I think it would have merit, definitely.
I would personally do that.
Yeah.
And I think while I would do that, I would get rid of that handlebar stem combo, which
that's another thing we do need to talk about.
And one of our 8 riders liked it. and nobody else enjoyed it.
Nah, so obviously you have the fixed bar roll. You don't get a choice what bar you spec on it when you're buying it. So you're fixed to whatever Canyon kind of delivers you on the geometry of that bar. And I think for all of us, it's just tilted too far forwards. It feels like, you know, you've got that. If you had the option to roll the bar in the stem, it feels like that one would be real far forward rolled. And yeah, it just doesn't gel that well with a lot of people, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm unsure as to what the reason or the merit is. Like, there's not a real need, in my opinion, to like.
For sure.
That. It is very neat. I like the integration, but again, that integration means one more part you have to buy when you want to get this screen off and mount it to a traditional bar. You're gonna have to find a clamp, because this one is very nicely tucked into that bar and stem combo. But
I'd say out of the bikes that don't have the display nestled in the top tube, which I think we all agree is the neatest way to do it.
Yep.
This is the cleanest,
yes.
But it's still not as clean as top tube mounted display.
Yeah, nice and flush integrated.
Yeah.
So for me, the Canyon Spectral on last year was an absolute shredder. I think that might have even been our video title. That thing was a blast. I really liked that bike, still like that bike. I think Canyon has done a very good job following up that last Spectral with this one. I do think a 160 fork upgrade would be what I would personally do, swap the bars. It does seem a little low. I'd probably also go with a 160 crank instead of the 165s,
yep.
At least for the riding I like to do, which is not necessarily groomed or new school trails, but more raw, chunky, rocky terrain. But it is a supple and very sensitive suspension platform, which I think is great. You know, both Frenchie and I really like that kind of soft off the top feel. It almost feels like that shock is like hyperactive compared to some other bikes. It just flutters over the terrain. I think the Geo is pretty balanced. The head tube angle might be a little steep for some.
But it's backed up with a relatively short rear end, so
it's super nimble. Like climbing it, snapping corners, and like, I mean, we were hitting some pretty big jumps on this bike on Devil's Racetrack, and like, didn't really feel too timid aboard it.
No.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun to jump, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Playful, great in the air. It probably hides the weight of that 900 watt-hour battery better than other bikes with smaller batteries. Like, this bike feels a lot lighter than it weighs.
For sure.
I think your general trail rider who's going to be, you know, looking to get fast, sweepy corners, maybe navigate a little bit of like tight technical rock gardens where you want like that little bit shorter, a little bit steeper feel. I also think that very playful riders who, you know, like an active and lively suspension feel, that maybe like popping and jibbing off little lips and rocks and features, will definitely enjoy it.
For sure. I think where it does also shine real good is the undulating terrain,
Yes.
especially if some of those undulations have got real rough and gnarly stuff. You know, just having that suspension tech, which kind of decides for you and, you know, tailors itself to the terrain ahead of you, it makes it a real good undulating terrain bike.
There you have it, folks. That is the Canyon Spectral on. Solid bike overall. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We are going to be reviewing each bike individually as we work towards our grand finale episode where we talk about all 13 of the bikes in this shootout together. It's going to be a good one. So stay tuned. Lots more videos coming. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you out on the trails.